The rain came sideways that night. Daniel Carter sat in the parking lot of Mercy General Hospital with the engine off and the heater dead, staring at the bill folded in his lap. The number at the bottom had 7 digits. He'd read it 4 times. The number hadn't changed. Outside, the Chicago skyline bled orange through the downpour. The south side was quiet in the way it only got past midnight, not peaceful, just tired. Daniel understood that kind of tired, the kind that had nothing to do with sleep. He was 34 years old, and he had $41 in his checking account. 3 weeks ago, he'd been a floor supervisor at Midland Steel Fabrication. Union wages, reliable, not glamorous, but real. Enough for rent on the 2-bedroom on Halstead. Enough for Lily's dance lessons and the asthma medication she needed every morning before school. Enough to feel like a man who had something to show for 10 years of working with his hands. Then, the plant had announced a restructuring. 22 workers let go in a single afternoon. Daniel had been given a cardboard box and a handshake. That was 22 days ago. Since then, he'd sent out 61 job applications. He'd heard back from 3. 2 were scams. One was a security guard position that paid $9 an hour, less than half of what he'd made at Midland. He'd taken it anyway. And then, 8 days ago, Lily had collapsed at school. She was 8 years old, and she had collapsed in the gym during a fire drill, and her teacher had called 911 before Daniel even knew anything was wrong. By the time he got to the ER, Lily was unconscious, her lips faintly blue, and a doctor with kind eyes was using words like cardiac arrhythmia and immediate intervention and specialist consult. Words that cost money Daniel did not have. He leaned his forehead against the cold steering wheel and breathed. In the back seat, a stuffed rabbit named Gerald Lilies, left behind during one of the visits, slumped against the door. Daniel looked at it in the rearview mirror. Come on, he thought. Think. The hospital's financial counselor had walked him through every option that afternoon. Medicaid application pending 3 to 6 weeks minimum. The Children's Care Fund had a wait list. Payment plans stretched into a decade. The specialist wouldn't operate without a deposit. He'd already called his brother in Phoenix. Marcus had 4 kids and a mortgage underwater. He'd already called his father, who'd offered prayers and nothing else. He had no savings. He had no one left to call. He sat up, ran a hand over his face. He needed to think clearly. He needed a plan. That's when someone opened the passenger door. Daniel's hand shot to the door handle. He spun around. A woman was sliding into the seat beside him. Not a homeless person seeking shelter. Not someone panicking in a parking lot. She was wearing a black wool coat, perfectly cut, with the collar turned up against the rain. Her hair was pulled back severely. Her shoes, the brief flash he caught as she settled in, were not the kind of shoes that belonged in a hospital parking lot at midnight. She was not what the night called for. "You're Daniel Carter," she said. Not a question. He stared at her. "Lady, you just got into my car. I know." She set a manila folder on the dashboard. She did not look at him when she spoke. She looked straight ahead, through the rain-blurred windshield, at nothing in particular. "Your daughter is Lily Carter, 8 years old. Currently a patient in the pediatric cardiac unit, 3rd floor. You were laid off from Midland Steel 3 weeks ago. Your current account balance is $41. The silence that followed was absolute. Daniel's hand tightened on the door handle. "Who are you?" She turned. In the faint light from the parking lot lamps, her face was all angles, sharp jaw, pale eyes, the kind of controlled expression that took years of practice. "Victoria Hale," she said. "My company is Hale Group. We're headquartered on Michigan Avenue." He knew the name. Everyone in Chicago knew the name. Hale Group was on billboards, in financial news, on the facades of 3 towers downtown. Hale Group was worth, he didn't even know the number, a lot, more than he could conceptualize. "Hale Group." He said it slowly. "You're that Hale, and you're sitting in my car, in the rain." "It is raining," she agreed. Daniel looked at the manila folder on the dashboard, then back at her. Victoria Hale reached forward and opened the folder. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a contract, clean, typed, precise. At the bottom, a number was printed in large, clear font. He stared at it. His daughter needed surgery. The number was more than enough. I need a man to accompany me to my parents' estate at Lake Geneva this weekend, Victoria said. Her voice did not waver. 3 days. You will present yourself as my partner of 6 months. You will attend a family dinner Friday, a lunch with extended family Saturday, and a farewell breakfast Sunday. At no point will you indicate that this arrangement is anything other than genuine. Daniel didn't move. Why? Because my parents believe I am incapable of sustaining a relationship. My father has convened what is effectively an intervention. With my mother's full support, they intend to discuss the future of my ownership stake in the company if I remain, in their words, emotionally unavailable. She paused. I need them to see something different. For 3 days, so you want an actor. I want someone presentable who can hold a conversation, follow instructions, and keep their mouth shut afterward. He looked at the contract again. Then, at her. You have a company worth billions of dollars, he said. You could hire someone actually trained for this. I tried that approach once, she said flatly. The man sold his story to a financial magazine 6 days after the weekend ended. I'm not hiring an actor. I'm hiring someone with too much at stake to talk. Daniel understood what she meant. She'd found someone desperate. He should have been angry. Maybe he was. He wasn't sure anymore. He picked up the contract. Read it properly, all the language, the NDAs, the termination clauses, the conditions. He was a floor supervisor. He read safety manuals and equipment certifications for a living. He could read a contract. When he set it down, he looked at her. You're running from something, he said. Victoria Hale went very still. Not something, she said after a moment. Someone. It was the first crack, small, almost invisible. But Daniel Carter had spent 10 years reading men under pressure on a factory floor the moment before someone made a mistake, the second before something went wrong. He could see the difference between a person who was composed and a person who had practiced composure until it looked the same. She was the second kind. He looked at the rain, then at Gerald the rabbit in the back seat. Then he said, I'll go. I'll play the role you need, but I won't lie about who I am. He met her eyes. I'm a working man. If your parents ask what I do, I'll tell them the truth. I'm not pretending to be something I'm not. I'll be your partner. I won't be your prop. Victoria Hale stared at him for a long moment. Then she reached across and took the contract back, uncapped a pen, signed her name at the bottom, handed it back to him. Sign, she said. He signed. The next 48 hours were the strangest of Daniel Carter's life, and he had once spent a February night on the floor of an ER waiting room with a 4-year-old on his lap and no coat, so the bar was not low. Victoria sent a car, a black SUV so quiet it felt like moving through water, to collect him Thursday morning. The driver didn't speak. Daniel sat in the back with his one presentable jacket across his knees, feeling the gap between the leather seat and his jeans like a physical thing. The SUV took him to a penthouse on the 63rd floor of a building on Michigan Avenue. The view from the windows was the kind that made you feel like the city was a painting rather than a place you lived. Victoria was waiting, already dressed, with a woman named Claire who appeared to handle everything from Victoria's wardrobe to her schedule to what looked like her emotional regulation. Claire handed Daniel a garment bag without comment. Try these, Victoria said. We need to be able to move through the estate naturally. You should look comfortable in these clothes. He held up the jacket inside the bag. Wool, beautifully cut. He turned it over and found no price tag, which he understood was itself a kind of information. He changed in the guest bathroom. When he came out, Claire made 3 adjustments to the collar and pronounced him acceptable. Victoria looked at him for a moment with what he'd come to understand was her default expression, measuring, neutral, giving nothing away. "We met 8 months ago," she said, "at a charity gala for the Lakeside Children's Fund. You were there with a friend who worked in the event catering. You and I spoke near the bar about she paused architecture. You had strong opinions about the Aqua building. I don't know anything about architecture. You think the Aqua building is structurally impressive, but visually overrated. Do I? You do now." He almost smiled. "What else do I think?" They rehearsed for 3 hours. Not like actors running lines, more like two people building a shared language under time pressure. Daniel noticed she was methodical about it. She didn't want performance, she wanted consistency. The same story, told the same way, in the same order. Dates, details. How he'd called her the next day. When she'd finally agreed to dinner, what he didn't expect was how often she paused to ask him questions. Real ones. "Do you actually like jazz?" "Not really." "What do you like?" He thought about it. "Baseball. Old westerns. The river at 5 in the morning when it's quiet." She wrote nothing down. She just looked at him, as though filing it somewhere. Around noon, his phone rang. He checked the screen. Lily's ward nurse. He stepped away to the window. 2 minutes. 3. When he came back, Victoria was standing exactly where he'd left her. But something in her posture had shifted. She'd been watching him while he talked. He could tell by the angle of her chin. "She had a good morning," he said. She ate half a bowl of oatmeal. Victoria looked at the phone in his hand. "How old is she?" 8. "What is she like?" The question surprised him. He'd expected nothing. People asked about Lily as a formality. They didn't usually want the actual answer. "Gerald," he said. "Her rabbit. And space documentaries. She wants to be an astronaut. She's been saying it since she was 5, and I keep waiting for her to change her mind. But she doesn't." Something moved briefly across Victoria's face. Not quite a smile. Something softer and more complicated than that. "We should leave by 3, she said. "The drive to Lake Geneva is 90 minutes in light traffic." The Hale estate sat on a hillside above the lake like it had always been there. Gray stone, slate roofs, tall windows that caught the last light of the afternoon and turned it amber. It was not a home in the way Daniel understood homes. It was a statement. Richard Hale met them at the door. He was in his late 60s, silver-haired, with the kind of handshake that told you immediately what kind of man you were dealing with. Firm, measured, deliberate. He looked at Daniel the way a chess player looks at a new piece on the board, not with contempt, but with calculation. "Daniel," he said. "Mr. Hale." Daniel met the handshake with equal pressure. "Thank you for having me." Eleanor Hale appeared behind her husband. She was elegant in the way old money produced, effortless, understated, warm on the surface with something watchful underneath. She kissed Victoria's cheek and studied Daniel with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "We've heard so little about you," she said pleasantly. There it is, Daniel thought. Dinner was at 7. In the intervening hours, Daniel was shown to a guest room, given a tour by a quiet staff member, and left briefly alone. He sat on the edge of the bed, called the hospital to check on Lily. Heard that she'd eaten a full dinner and asked for her rabbit, and felt the particular ache of being physically far from the only person who mattered. He sat with that for a minute. Then he stood up, squared his shoulders, did what needed to be done. The dining room was formal, long table, good china, silver that had been polished until it hurt to look at. Eleanor had invited a cousin, a man named Bradley with a firm in New York, and Bradley's wife, Constance. They were both polite in the way that meant they were evaluating everything he said. Richard opened the questioning almost immediately. "What line of work are you in, Daniel?" The table waited. Victoria had shifted almost imperceptibly in her chair. Daniel felt it without looking at her. "I was a floor supervisor at a steel fabrication plant," he said. His voice was even. "I was laid off 3 weeks ago in a restructuring. I'm currently looking for work." The silence that followed lasted approximately 4 seconds. It felt longer. Bradley cleared his throat quietly. Constance lifted her wine glass. Eleanor looked at her husband. Richard looked at Daniel. "I see," Richard said. "I'm not ashamed of it," Daniel said. 10 years in manufacturing. Before that, 2 years in construction. I know how to work, and I know how to solve problems. I'll find something. It's a matter of when, not if." He didn't look at Victoria. He didn't need to. Eleanor leaned forward slightly. "How did the two of you meet?" Victoria has been remarkably private about the details. "A charity event," Daniel said. 8 months ago, we talked for 2 hours about the Aqua building and ended up missing the dinner entirely. I called her the next day, and she answered?" Eleanor asked, with a faint note of surprise. "Third call," he said. "She let me leave 2 messages first." Something happened at the corners of Eleanor's mouth. Almost a smile. Richard refilled his wine. "What do you know about the Hale Group?" "Enough," Daniel said. "Real estate, logistics, some healthcare investment. 3 towers downtown. You started it in 1989 with capital from your wife's family and grew it through the dot-com crash without losing your primary assets. Victoria has been running operations since she was named CEO at 31. Richard set the bottle down. "You did your research." "I was interested in the woman, not the company," Daniel said. "But they come together." The table was quiet again. This time, the quality of the silence was different. After dinner, Richard asked Daniel to join him in the study. The room was lined with bookshelves and smelled of old paper and fireplace smoke. A chessboard stood on a low table between 2 leather chairs already set up, already waiting. Daniel understood this was not a spontaneous suggestion. "Do you play?" Richard asked. "I know the rules," Daniel said honestly. Richard nodded and took his seat. Daniel sat across from him. They played in near silence. Richard was good, measured, patient, ruthless in the middle game. Daniel was not good, and he didn't pretend otherwise. He thought slowly, checked his moves twice, made some errors he caught only after it was too late to fix them. Richard, to his credit, did not hurry him. He sat with his glass of brandy and waited with the patience of a man who had made a great deal of money by outwaiting other people. Each time Daniel moved a piece, Richard studied the board for a long moment, before responding, not because he needed the time, Daniel sensed, but because he was watching how Daniel absorbed the consequences. But Daniel didn't rush. He didn't concede pieces early to seem humble. He played every position to its actual end. Even when the end was inevitable, even when the position was lost, he looked for what he could still do with what remained. He lost in 32 moves. "You're not a strong player," Richard said, "but you don't panic. Panicking doesn't change the board." Richard looked at him across the chess pieces for a moment that stretched longer than it needed to. "No," he said, slowly. "It doesn't." He reached forward and reset the queen piece to its starting square. A habit, perhaps a man returning things to their proper positions. "Victoria's mother wants her to be happy. I want her to be," he paused, searching for the word, "anchored. She's been untethered since Marcus died. You understand what I mean by untethered?" Daniel didn't ask who Marcus was. He filed the name. He'd ask Victoria later, on his own terms. Not as performance. "I think I do," he said. "You're not the kind of man I imagined for my daughter," Richard said. "I'll be honest about that. I know. When I imagined someone for her, I imagined a man with a certain kind of stability, a certain structure." He looked at the board. "Money is structure, to people like me. I understand it's not the only kind. I'm not sure I fully appreciated that until recently." Daniel waited. "But you're honest, and honest men are harder to find than I'd like." He stood, extended his hand. "Good night, Daniel." Daniel stood and shook it. "Good night, Mr. Hale." When he came back to the sitting room, Victoria was waiting in an armchair near the fire, holding a glass of wine she hadn't touched. She looked up when he entered. He sat in the chair across from her. "He likes you," she said quietly. "I can tell. He respects people who don't flinch," Daniel said. I didn't flinch. She looked at the fire. "That's usually harder than it sounds. With him. You do it every day," he said. She said nothing. But she looked at him again, briefly, with something in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Not warmth. Exactly something more fragile and more honest than warmth. The look of a person surprised to be seen. He couldn't sleep. The guest room was too quiet, too still. None of the low, familiar noise of his apartment building. No distant traffic. No upstairs neighbor's television bleeding through the ceiling. The silence here was expensive and absolute, and it kept him awake. He went to the balcony off the hallway, stood at the railing, and looked at the lake. It was clouded over. No moon. The water, black and flat. He heard the door behind him. Victoria came out in a heavy robe, holding a mug. She stopped when she saw him. "I didn't think anyone would be out here," she said. "I can go in." "You don't have to." She came and stood at the railing beside him. Not close, but not far either. They both looked at the water. After a while, she said, "My parents mentioned Marcus. Your father did." "He didn't explain. He was my fiancé." Her voice was completely flat. Not from coldness, Daniel recognized this now, but from the particular control of someone who had learned to carry something very heavy by distributing the weight perfectly evenly. He died 4 years ago. A car accident on I-90 on a November night. He was driving back from a client meeting. A truck lost a tire. Daniel didn't say, "I'm sorry." He'd heard that phrase directed at himself so many times in the years since Sarah died that he knew exactly how little it meant, and exactly how automatically people said it when they had nothing else. He said, Victoria turned her head slightly, as though surprised. "Impatient," she said, after a moment. He finished everyone's sentences. He was terrible at sitting still. He laughed too loudly at his own jokes. A pause. He was the only person who could make me stop working. The rain started light, barely there, more mist than rain. "My wife's name was Sarah," Daniel said. "She had a virus that attacked her heart. Nobody caught it until it was too late. Lily was 3. He looked at the water. For a long time after, I couldn't figure out if I was more angry or more guilty. I kept thinking about everything I should have noticed and didn't. Every headache she mentioned. Every time she said she was tired. "You would have thought she was just tired," Victoria said. "I know that now. It took time to know it. 2 years. Lily helped." He thought about how to explain that. You can't stay inside your own head when someone is asking you for breakfast. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. "I don't have anyone asking me for breakfast," she said. She didn't say it with self-pity. Just as a fact, the way she said everything. But Daniel heard what was underneath it, not loneliness. Exactly. Something older than that. Absence so long it had started to feel like architecture. The rain picked up slightly. Neither of them moved. "Eleanor asked me tonight if I actually liked you," Victoria said. "Or if I was hiding something. What did you tell her?" She looked at him. In the rain and the low light from the hallway, her face was unguarded in a way he hadn't seen before. Not soft, exactly, but open. "I told her I was still figuring that out," she said. Saturday morning. The family lunch had gone better than dinner. Richard was warmer in daylight. Bradley had stopped testing him by the second course, and Eleanor had shown him the garden with a quiet pride that made her seem like a completely different person than the woman who'd watched him across the table Friday night. He was in the sitting room reading when his phone buzzed. Lily, video. He picked up. Her face filled the screen pale, still, the hospital pillow framing her hair, but her eyes were bright. She was wearing her astronaut pajamas. Gerald the rabbit was propped beside her. "Dad," she said, "you look fancy." "I look the same." You have a caller." He laughed. He sat down on the sofa and held the phone up. "How are you feeling, Lil?" "My chest hurts a little, but the nurse brought me pudding." "Chocolate. Did you know they have chocolate pudding?" "I did not know that." "It's good. Not as good as yours, but—" She tilted her head. "Where are you?" "Lake Geneva. I told you. Remember? The trip for the weekend." "Oh yeah." She squinted at him. "Is Victoria there?" He hesitated. "She is. Can I talk to her?" "Lily, please." She used the voice, the specific register that had worked on him since she was 4 years old. Victoria appeared in the doorway. He wasn't sure how long she'd been standing there. She was still, watching the phone screen with the particular attention of someone who wasn't used to being in scenes like this one and wasn't sure what the rules were. Daniel turned the phone toward her. Lily's face broke into a full grin. "Hi." Victoria walked into the room, sat down beside him close, this time not far, and looked at the screen. "Hello," she said, carefully. "Dad says you're smart," Lily said. "Are you good at math?" "I am. I'm okay at math. I'm better at science. Do you know about the James Webb Telescope?" "I know a little. It can see 13 billion years into the past," Lily said, with great satisfaction. "That means when you look at the pictures you're looking at before—" Victoria was quiet for a moment. "Before what?" she asked. "Before everything," Lily said. Something moved through Victoria's expression, rapid and complex, like weather. "That's a remarkable way to think about it," she said. Lily looked at Daniel. "I like her," she announced, with the direct authority of an 8-year-old. "She's nice. She's sitting right here, Lil." "I know." She beamed at Victoria. "You can come visit me if you want. They have chocolate pudding." After the call ended, Daniel set the phone down. The room was quiet. Victoria was still beside him, closer than she'd positioned herself at any point in the last 2 days. She was looking at where the phone had been, not at anything in the room. The fire crackled. Outside, a bird was calling from somewhere in the trees above the lake. "She's extraordinary," Victoria said, finally. "I know. She talks about space like it's already hers." She paused. "Most children that age are afraid of things that are big and far away." "Not Lily," Daniel said. "She thinks the bigger something is, the more interesting. She told me once that the sun is just a star that happens to be close enough to matter." She was 6. He shook his head. "I don't know where she gets things like that." "She gets them from someone who listens to her," Victoria said, carefully. "That's not nothing." He looked at her. She was still watching the fireplace. He realized she was being precise, she'd said, the most generous thing she could think to say about him, and now she was giving him a moment to receive it without having to perform gratitude. He understood, then, that she was not actually cold. She had simply learned to be very, very careful about what she let out, and when, and to whom. Victoria stood, smoothed her robe, moved toward the door. "I'm going to speak to my mother," she said. Before lunch, she stopped in the doorway. "Daniel." She said his name like it was the first time she was using it. "I'm going to go to the hospital. When we get back to the city, I'd like to bring her something." He looked at her. "She'd like that?" he said. Victoria came alone. She had not told Daniel she was coming. She'd called the ward nurse, checked that visiting hours were open, and walked through the hospital's automatic doors at 2:30 on a Tuesday afternoon, carrying a wrapped package about the size of a shoebox and a container of chocolate pudding from a French bakery on Rush Street. Lily was sitting up when she came in. The color in her face was better. Still fragile, still careful, but better. She looked up from her book. Her face went through 3 distinct phases: surprise, recognition, then the particular unconstrained joy that children produce so effortlessly. "You came. I said I would." Victoria set the package on the bed tray. She sat in the visitor's chair, the plastic one, the uncomfortable one that Daniel clearly knew well because there was a folded sweater on the armrest. Lily tore the paper off the package with both hands. Inside, a detailed scale model of the James Webb Space Telescope with a field guide. Lily stared at it, then looked up. "How did you know?" she whispered. "A little," Victoria said. "Your father told me about the astronaut plan." Lily held the model with the careful reverence of someone who understood they'd been given something real. Then she looked up at Victoria with her father's eyes brown and direct and, when they wanted to, completely disarming. "Are you my dad's girlfriend?" she asked. Victoria had prepared for many questions. "Not this one." She started. "It's okay if you are," Lily said, matter-of-factly. "He smiles more when he talks about you. He thinks I don't notice, but I notice everything." Victoria looked at the child's face. Earnest, open, no agenda. She thought about Marcus. She thought about the years after, when she'd turned her grief into velocity faster, harder, more controlled until she couldn't have told you whether she was running a company or running away from the absence of something she'd never found a replacement for. She thought about a balcony above a black lake and a man who said, "What was he like?" when everyone else said, "I'm sorry," and how completely unprepared she'd been for that. She reached out and very gently took Lily's hand. "I'm still figuring some things out," she said. Lily nodded, as if this were a completely satisfactory answer. "That's okay," she said. "Gerald took a long time to decide he liked me too. Now he doesn't go anywhere without me." She held up the rabbit. Victoria looked at it. "He made a good choice," she said. She stayed for 2 hours. She ate pudding. She listened to 20 minutes of information about the James Webb Space Telescope. She helped Lily assemble the first section of the model. She left before Daniel arrived for the evening visit, but she saw him through the lobby window as she was heading for her car. He was coming in from the parking lot, hands in the pockets of his jacket, walking in the particular way of a man who knew exactly where he was going and had been going there every day for weeks. He didn't see her. She stood at the window and watched him walk through the automatic doors. Then she went to her car and sat in it for a long time before she started the engine. When she got home, she called her CFO and asked to have the Carter account flagged in their philanthropy department, the hospital bill, the whole amount, transferred directly to Mercy General's billing office as a charitable gift, anonymous. Then she made herself a cup of tea she didn't drink and stood at her window and looked at the city. The contract was for 3 days. The 3 days were over. Victoria returned to her office on Monday morning and the world resumed. The 9 o'clock briefing, the acquisition call with their Singapore partners, the board communication that needed to be drafted and redrafted. 47 unread messages before she'd even taken her coat off. She answered all of them. She attended every meeting. She was precise and capable and entirely in control. She did not call Daniel. That was correct. That was the agreement. The contract was complete. He had done what she'd asked. She had transferred what she'd promised. It was over. She told herself this several times throughout the week. It continued to be true. On Thursday, she came home to her penthouse at 9 p.m. and found it exactly as she'd left it, ordered, clean, silent. The view was the same view. The sofa was the same sofa. She sat on it, and for the first time in 4 years, the silence felt like an accusation. She thought about Lily saying he smiles more when he talks about you. She thought about a man who played chess badly and didn't apologize for it, who told a billionaire's father he'd been laid off without blinking, who sat on a balcony in the rain and asked what was he like he actually wanted to know. She opened her laptop, closed it, opened it again. She was writing an email to her mother when the thought arrived, clear and complete. I don't want to be doing this. Not the email. Not the evening. Not the architecture of her life as she'd built it since Marcus sealed, defended, functioning but uninhabited. She closed the laptop. She did nothing else that night except think, which was something she had not permitted herself to do in a very long time. Daniel was changing the sheets on Lily's hospital bed. The nurses let him do it because he'd asked, and they were short-staffed, and he needed something to do with his hands when Lily said, from behind him. Did she pretend? He stopped. He turned around. Lily was sitting up, Gerald in her lap, watching him with her father's directness. What? Victoria. Lily said the name carefully, like she'd been thinking it. When she came here. And when you were at the lake, was she pretending? Daniel sat down in the plastic chair. The question sat between them, completely honest. He looked at his daughter's face, 8 years old, recovering from something that had nearly taken her, still wearing the astronaut pajamas, still holding that rabbit. He had spent every day of the last 4 years trying to be enough. He had worked until his back hurt and his hands were rough, and there was never quite enough left over to fix everything that needed fixing. He had not once thought about what he was missing. He had not let himself. I don't know, he said. Lily considered this. I don't think she was, she said. She looked at things like she meant them, like the telescope. A pause. And she held my hand. Daniel looked at the floor. Some things started as pretending, he said carefully, and then they stopped being that. Lily nodded slowly. This apparently made sense to her. Are you going to call her? She asked. He looked up. Dad. She gave him the look, the one that said, I am 8 years old and I can see straight through you. It's a phone. You press the buttons. He laughed. He hadn't laughed in days, hadn't had room for it. It came out rough at first, then easier. Go to sleep, he said. Think about the buttons, she said. He turned off the light. He sat in the chair a while longer in the dark, listening to his daughter breathe. She came back on a Friday evening. No car. No driver. Victoria Hale walked through the lobby of his apartment building on Halstead in a gray coat, carrying nothing, having called no one in advance. Daniel opened the door when she knocked. He was in jeans and a flannel shirt and his reading glasses, which he didn't usually wear in front of people, and he didn't take them off because he didn't have time. He looked at her. The hospital bill, she said. I need you to know it was me. He was quiet. I filed it as a charitable transfer so you wouldn't feel she stopped. I didn't want you to feel like I was controlling the situation. But I need you to know it was real, not a transaction, not part of the contract. He leaned against the doorframe. Why? Because you deserve to know that. He looked at her. She was standing in his hallway, his actual hallway, with the scuffed baseboard and the overhead light that flickered, and she looked, for the first time since the parking lot in the rain, like she had run out of things to be strategic about. Come in, he said. She came in. The apartment was small and real. Lily's drawings taped to the refrigerator, a stack of library books on the coffee table, a half-finished model of the Saturn V rocket on the kitchen table that Daniel had been building with Lily over the last 3 weeks. He saw her take all of it in. He made coffee. She sat at the kitchen table. I don't know how to do this, she said, to the mug he'd placed in front of her. I should be clear about that. I haven't done this since Marcus. I'm very good at my job. I'm genuinely not good at the rest. I know, he said. That doesn't bother you? I'm a single father with $41 and a kid who thinks a stuffed rabbit is her emotional support system, he said. I'm not in a position to have high standards. She looked at him. Then, unexpected, so unexpected, it rearranged his understanding of her. Slightly she smiled. Not the controlled, measuring expression from the penthouse. A real one. I'm not pretending anymore, she said. Good. He said. Neither am I. 6 months later. The lake was different in summer, wide and blue and full of light. The hills around it green and easy. The stone house warm in a way it hadn't been in November. Victoria was standing on the dock with Eleanor, talking about something that made her mother laugh. Genuinely a real laugh, the kind that caught people off guard. Daniel was on the lawn with Richard, who had, over the course of 2 dinners and a Sunday call, become the kind of man who called Daniel on Saturday mornings to finish arguments about baseball they'd started the week before. They were sitting in wooden chairs, watching Lily. Lily was at the water's edge with a butterfly net and enormous ambitions. She was chasing something through the reeds, something small and fast, and very much not interested in being caught and narrating the entire pursuit to Gerald, who sat propped against a rock nearby. "She's extraordinary," Richard said. "I know," Daniel said. "You did that. She did most of it herself." Richard was quiet for a moment. Then, Daniel glanced at him. "I thought you were temporary," Richard said. "I was incorrect. I'm not easy to get rid of," Daniel said. "No," Richard agreed. "You're really not." Lily shrieked with victory and lifted the net. Whatever was inside, it was immediately released, apparently by accident, and she watched it go with philosophical acceptance before turning and sprinting toward them. "Dad, there's a frog. It was right there, and then it wasn't, and I need a better net." "We'll work on it," Daniel said. She flung herself into the chair beside him and leaned against his arm, catching her breath. Gerald was retrieved from the rock and placed firmly in her lap. Victoria came up from the dock. She met Daniel's eyes across the lawn. Something passed between them, not words, not performance, just recognition. The steady, quiet kind. She sat beside Lily and looked at the lake. "I didn't know you were this interested in frogs," she said. "I'm interested in everything," Lily said, with great seriousness. "That's the right approach." Eleanor appeared with a tray of lemonade that no one had asked for and everyone wanted. Richard accepted his glass. Daniel accepted his. Lily was already moving again back toward the water, Gerald tucked under one arm, net in the other hand. "We have a proposition," Eleanor said, looking between Daniel and Victoria. "Your father and I want to host Christmas this year. The whole week." Victoria looked at Daniel. He looked back at her. "Lily would love a week at the lake," he said. "We'll be here," Victoria said. Eleanor smiled, the real one, the one that had taken months to earn, and went back inside. Richard stood, creaking slightly, and watched his granddaughter run across the lawn toward the water. "She's going to wake up every frog in the county," he said. "Probably," Daniel agreed. Later, after the lemonade, after Lily finally gave up on the frogs and demanded to be taught to skip stones, after dinner and dishes and putting Lily to sleep in the guest room, that now had a space poster on the wall, Daniel and Victoria stood on the balcony again. The one above the lake. The same railing, the same water. No rain this time. Stars. "Last time we stood here," he said, "you told me you were still figuring things out." "I know. Have you figured them out?" She was quiet for a moment. She looked at the water, then up at the sky, then at him. "Most of them," she said. He leaned against the railing. "Which ones are left?" "This one," she said. "Whether I'm brave enough for the version of my life that has you in it." He looked at her steadily. "You walked into a stranger's car in the rain," he said. "At midnight. You're brave enough." She looked at him for a long time. "Then, this time I didn't hire you." He smiled. "Good," he said. "I wouldn't have signed anyway." Below them, the lake held the stars on its surface, still and whole. Nothing pretend about any of it. Inside the house, through the open window, they could hear Eleanor moving in the kitchen, a cabinet closing. The soft sound of a light being switched off, the ordinary music of a home settling into night. Daniel had not grown up with a home like this one. He had grown up in an apartment in Bridgeport with a radiator that clanged, and a father who worked doubles, and a mother who sang in the kitchen on Sundays. Different entirely. But the music underneath it, the sound of people closing out a day together, was the same. He thought about $41 in a hospital parking lot. About a woman in a black coat getting into a stranger's car like she belonged there. Some things started impossible and became inevitable. You couldn't plan for them. You just had to be willing to stay.